Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 192, which is called The Past. So, we got a little bit of manga adaptation in this episode, but it was just a little bit, because most of this episode focused on heavily expanding out Kawaki's backstory as we'd already sort of gotten it already. So in the previous episodes, we had seen a little glimpse into the past of like, okay, something like he didn't have a good relationship with his father. Jigen sort of came and bought Kawaki from his father, but it was very quick, very brief. They didn't go in depth on it. That's what this episode did. They gave you much more context surrounding, just how bad Kawaki's father was to him, and then really, I suppose, more emphasizing just this dynamic for him of any time he in any way gets his hopes up and begins to trust someone, they breach that trust, and this is why Kawaki presently has a huge problem with trusting anyone because of what's happened in the past. And they double down on that here because in the manga, during this section, they do flesh out Kawaki's backstory. But a lot of what was in this episode they don't cover. They leave the scenes with Jigen and his father to pretty much just being, here's the deal, Kawaki's father was a drunk, that's pretty much all you need to know. There's obviously a sense that he's like kind of abused him, beat him, and that's really it. Here you get more of the detail on it, that what Kawaki's father did, the situation he created that created such a terrible life for Kawaki, was that yes, he was a drunk, but he used Kawaki to assist him with that, which is that he basically told Kawaki, go out every day, cut wood, sell the wood, and then the money you make from selling that wood, buy liquor with it and bring the liquor home to me. And then if you don't bring home enough, depending on how I'm feeling that day, you don't get dinner, or you get locked in this room in the back. And he just treats Kawaki absolutely terribly, doesn't seem to care about him, and as we saw a few times in the episode, calls him empty and that there's nothing inside of him. Obviously presenting the idea of, he is a vessel type thing, there's nothing to him, but in a way, how is there meant to be if that's the way he was raised? Now, we also get some context we didn't get in the manga, which is that apparently Kawaki's father was actually a reasonably strong shinobi who fought in the war, and he's sort of been changed after that. So what he encountered during the war sort of has, I suppose, turned him into this person. Just highlighting that it felt like there was stuff in place to deal with this sort of stuff at the end of Naruto, but clearly some people slipped through the cracks and created situations like this of this guy is just a drunk and he doesn't care about his son at all, and this was clearly missed. But it creates just a little bit of nuance to the situation, to where Kawaki's father isn't just the villain of all villains. Yes, he's a terrible father, but at least there's a, okay, so that's how this happened. It sort of stems off, just maybe not handling people's mental health in the aftermath of the war so well, and this happens, and you get the idea that there's probably more situations like this across the world, but Kawaki specifically had a particularly rough upbringing. You just see that basically Kawaki got punished for any time anyone around him sort of did something wrong. If he didn't get the exact same amount of money the previous day for the same amount of wood, if the guy who runs the liquor store gave less liquor than he did the previous day, Kawaki would get in trouble for that, even though he can do nothing to affect that. And especially the scene where Kawaki runs into basically two bullies effectively, and they understand the situation he's in, but they basically just make fun of his father, that you have to do all of this stuff to run errands for your father, even though he's crazy. And Kawaki defends his father, which is interesting, and it speaks to the fact of is there an extra layer to the backstory that we don't know about, which would maybe explain why his father refers to him as being empty, and like there's nothing inside of him. Because is that just that they wrote the father to say the line to coincide with the vessel metaphor that they're going for, or is there actually something to that? Like what happened to Kawaki's mother? Is there more to the fact that, his father was a shinobi and stuff like that? That's what I'm kind of wondering of, like, somewhere down the road, maybe even in the manga, we'll get to some extra Kawaki backstory that might explain why he defends his father outside of just, he's my father. Because ultimately, Kawaki goes along with this, he accepts it, even though he sort of knows it's a terrible situation that he's in. And the one glimpse of hope he seems to have is that goldfish salesman who is kind of nice to him and offers him this sort of thing that Kawaki wants for the first time in forever, basically. Now, Kawaki would like to own a goldfish at some point. He'd like to go see this goldfish show that the guy talks about. And it seems like at certain points of the episodes that this guy is standing up for him. Here is someone who maybe could be a better father figure to him. But the big twist at the end of the episode is that this guy comes and tries to intervene in Jigen taking Kawaki. And is like, hey, I was planning to do that. So you find out that he was actually a child trafficker who was basically just manipulating Kawaki to trust him so he'd leave his father just to be in this guy's possession and then be sold on. And this is just an extra layer that wasn't there. Like, you already got the sense from the manga that, okay, he went from having an abusive father who didn't care for him and not a good father figure to Jigen, who treated him better in some ways but then experimented on him and gave him this present that he did not want with the karma mark. And changed his life in a very different way that Kawaki didn't want. So another breach of trust. But here they add that extra layer on, in that this one guy who seemed like the glimmer of hope also lied to him, and any trust that he had is gone at that point. And it's very significant that when we see the scene from the manga where Kawaki wakes up in the hospital bed and, Konohamaru, Shikamaru, and Naruto are there. Naruto says the same line that Jigen says when Kawaki sort of goes into a new place, which is that this is a safe place, there's no need to worry. But what they're obviously doing is they're setting up the idea that Kawaki maybe thought, okay, maybe Jigen, things will be better with Jigen, but then he walks in and sees all the kids in the bags and the experimentation that's going on, it's not going to go well. And he's on edge around Naruto when he wakes up because he feels that, oh, someone else saying the exact same stuff, an adult in this position, something's going to go wrong here, I can't trust him. So the question obviously is, how is Naruto going to be able to get through to Kawaki? Because we already know from the last episode as well as the preview that Naruto has decided he is going to be the one to look after Kawaki. And the preview is obviously, next episode is going to be much more heavily focused on manga content. Really, really good manga content as well. So that's really exciting for next week, that we're going to get into, for me, some of the best character stuff that Boruto has to offer with the Kawaki, Boruto, Naruto dynamic, plus other characters involved, of course. So that all works really, really well for me. Is there anything else to say about the backstory? I suppose the goldfish metaphor that they used, which was basically one of the villagers noticed that just Kawaki is kind of like a goldfish in that he's entirely reliant on this kind of small environment that he's in to survive, and that if he tried to run away and leave that environment, there's no path for him to survive or thrive. So he's exactly like a goldfish. The goldfish leaves its vessel. What can it do? Nothing, because it's not strong enough to get to other water or anything like that. So that's the position that they place Kawaki in at this point. And And I guess they're trying to play with the idea of like, okay, Kawaki has always sort of lived in a vessel and has always been referred to as an empty vessel. Will he finally be able to sort of thrive on his own? And will he be able to kind of, I suppose, fill himself with any sense of trust or care for those around him? Which, if you read the manga, we're seeing that. And it makes the idea that, the opening chapter of Boruto, the opening episode as well, that we're eventually going to get to Boruto versus Kawaki in the future on opposite sides, very, very interesting and thought-provoking because of the trajectory of this arc at this point is clearly Kawaki finally finding people he can trust and being comfortable around people, and what will happen to sort of break this apart. Very, very interesting. Which again, are we going to get more into the Kawaki backstory and explain why his father calls him empty? Because it's a bit of a weird word to just describe your kid as, given that like the position you put him in as his father. So is there something behind that? The other thing would be that Delta is in this episode. Delta is the one who finds the kind of bloody handkerchief that Kawaki uses to wipe off the punch from one of the kids. And clearly this is why Jigen then goes to visit Kawaki. So the other thing is, like, why is Kawaki so special? He has the karma mark a lot of other kids were obviously tested on, and it didn't work. Why is Kawaki... What's unique about Kawaki that made it work with him? Is it because, he truly is empty? Is that why it worked? That there was nothing there, so he could accept this power, no question. But what exactly does that mean, and how does it relate to his blood? Now, revealing that his father's a shinobi obviously maybe implies that, okay, he maybe has some potential. If his father was a strong shinobi, that he was born with like the potential to use a decent amount of chakra. That doesn't explain everything, though. So is there something on the mother's side that we again don't know about at this point? There's interesting and thought-provoking things like that, because as we sort of know it now, Kawaki seems to be more unique from the perspective of he's like a scientific ninja tool person. But there was potential in the first place before all of that stuff happened. That was to like augment him to make him even better. But he was already suited and a candidate to be the vessel before now. And obviously, in the anime, we're still asking the question, a vessel for what? What's all of this about? The big reveal hasn't happened yet in the anime. Manga readers like myself, we know the full story here to a degree. But it's cool the way they're adding extra depth here. So the next bit of the backstory that we're going to get is definitely going to be the very interesting one, that when they get into more of the specifics on, what the experimentation actually was, and just how tragic, Kawaki's time with Jigen actually was. We have a sense of it, but again, we haven't seen the details yet. There's also just the sense of, okay, we're talking about character stuff that's about to happen between Kawaki, Boruto, and Naruto, but there's also part of the reason we're even doing this with Kawaki is that we want to know what's going on with the karma marks, which Kashin Koji has also decided he's going to investigate. So, 2 karma marks in close proximity, what happens? What's the development on that side of things? What are the karma marks? And that's all working quite well. So, this episode definitely was a positive in my mind, just adding a decent amount of extra context to Kawaki's backstory, making it a little bit more in-depth, hitting the themes, metaphors just a little bit harder than you would have expected, in that by the end of the episode you get the idea of Kawaki is now, the goldfish out of his own pond in a way, but he's now just in another one. And now the question is, like, with Naruto, is he in another kind of vessel again, or is this finally the time for him to be free? So that's the big question. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.